Okay, Ryan, let's get straight to business. Let's get straight to finding more about the world of Recyclops. Tell me, what is Recyclops?
Yeah, so we specialize in sustainability focused logistics and really sustainability accessibility. Our whole mission is around bringing access to sustainability initiatives,
Mhm.
particularly recycling, but not exclusively recycling. We do a lot of reuse programs and composting, that all the the like. And really our focus is logistics. When I think about the circular economy and recycling, and you have these like chasing arrows. You have like a circle of arrows for like the circular economy, or you have the recycle triangle, and those denote movement. Something has to get from here to there in order to be processed. And that's one of the biggest holes in this whole industry is there's a lot of people who care. There's a lot of processors who want more, whatever material to process. But
Mhm.
it's like, how do you connect those dots? And that's Recyclops. That's what we do. We connect those dots.
So, I mean, Recyclops has been going for a long time now. Tell me,
Yeah, we've been going for about a decade.
yeah, nice, long time, long time. Definitely not a startup anymore. Tell me, where did the idea come from? Where did this kind of passion to build Recyclops come from?
And yeah, so I it all started for me when I moved to an apartment complex that didn't have recycling. And, I will say I still think we're definitely in startup mode. It's been a long startup journey, but still feel very, very much like a startup. But
Nice, nice.
I moved to an apartment that didn't have recycling, and I'd grown up recycling. It was actually right after I moved home from Russia. I lived in Russia for 2 years. There wasn't a lot of recycling in Russia, but that didn't frankly surprise me. But when I got back to the United States, I moved into an apartment. I'd always recycled in the US. And I moved into this apartment and I had bought from a vending machine on campus. I bought like a Sprite or a Coke or something. And I went to go put it in the recycling and there was none in this new apartment of mine. And I was like, what? And so I started doing some digging and saw that my apartment wasn't unique and it wasn't like my city or my state, or it was, everywhere. Actually, globally, apartments are a recycling challenge. And in the US in particular, it's a struggle. And that's how I first got started. It was like, wow. And so I started the first kind of iteration of that was in 2011. 2013, I finally decided, hey, I'm going to actually do this. I'm going to pull the trigger.
Mhm.
Um, and 2014, we had our first revenue focused just on apartment recycling. But as I got deeper and deeper into this space, I saw that apartments weren't unique. They weren't the only place where there was a lack of access. And you know, I felt like people should have access. Like, you know, being able to make sustainable choices and live environmentally and in an environmentally conscious way, that shouldn't be impacted by where you live. Like you should be able to do that. If you live in an apartment, you live in a small town, if you live anywhere, like, and so really that's what we've tried to do is, no matter where someone lives, they should be able to have access. And if there were challenges though, like, the biggest challenge that we faced was I priced it based on making money from the cardboard.
Mhm.
And that made sense because it lowered the barriers to entry, enabled us to sell faster, all of this. And cardboard prices, they went up and down. It's a commodity. Like you see oil and gas prices would go up and down and whatnot, but generally speaking, it stayed pretty stable. Well, that all changed overnight, basically, when China, who was the number one recycler in the world, most of the recycling in the US was going to China. China was, if in the US, you see, turn around any box and chances are it says made in China, at
Mhm.
least historically. Well, guess how they make those boxes? They need material. The raw material they're using is recycling.
Mhm.
But China decided they didn't want to be the world's dump. And so they passed some regulation that basically stopped European and United States shipping of recycled goods into China.
When was this?
Um, this happened in 2017. It's called
Mm.
National Sport. This was the policy.
Mm.
I think it was 2017. Although I'm googling it right now because I'm um, curious. 2017. Yep. Okay. My timeline's right. 2017, they did this, and so we've been in business for a number of years. Kind of experimented around this whole cardboard thing. We were humming with that, but then suddenly cardboard went from earlier in the summer I was selling cardboard for $120 a ton, um, and suddenly overnight I was selling cardboard for $20 a ton. Literally overnight, I got a phone call that from place we were selling cardboard to said, "Hey, I got some bad news. The floor fell out," and that was it. And so suddenly the business didn't make sense anymore. All of my costs stayed the same, but my revenue went down by, six times. And I could have it go down by a little bit. I could go from 120 to 80 and survive, but 120 to 20, it's like, and that it was tough. And so, this is a really important part of my journey in Recyclops because it was kind of like, do I give up? I'd actually had a bunch of debt. I had several $100,000 of debt
Mhm.
that I was tied to, and now I wasn't really able to service the debt. How am I going to make this work? What do I do? The apartments have a 12-month payback. That's not going to work. I
Mhm.
can't do that. I can't do the cardboard thing anymore because that doesn't make sense anymore. What can I do? What can I do? So I raised the prices on cardboard, lost a bunch of customers, started, shuffling assets and charging installation fees to try and make up for it. But I can only do so much of that.
Mhm.
Um, and saw that during this same time, we'd actually had this small family run business reach out to us and say, hey, um, they basically were like, hey, we've been doing recycling for our city for the last decade because our city didn't have a program. And so we just signed up a bunch of neighbors and they were paying us, $10 a month. And our kids, did it kind of like a paper route. Like they would drive around, they would go around and I drive them around and they pick up all the recycling. And it was a good way for our kids to earn money and pay
Mhm.
for college and whatnot. And but they called and said like, hey, our kids all grew up. Our kids, they had 3 boys and they said all 3 boys got married this year.
Well,
Whoa.
uh-huh.
And the mom was like, we don't want recycling to go away in our city, but I don't want to keep doing it all myself. And I
Mhm.
can't ask my kids to do it. Like they've left the nest. And I looked at this and the big first thing I looked at was not just like, oh, what's this interesting business? Like, oh, that's interesting. Was like, what on earth? How is there a city that doesn't have recycling?
Mhm.
What's happening here? And what I learned was that, well, at first I thought like I thought back to my apartment days when I moved into an apartment. And at first, my first thought was like, my apartment sucks. My apartment's unique. My apartment. But then as I got out into the world, I saw like, no, my apartment isn't unique. This is a lot of apartments.
Mhm.
60% of apartments in the US are in this boat. And then I thought like, okay, there's no way that this city is unique. There's no way. So I did some research and did a random sample. I didn't find a lot of research, like a lot of data online on this. So I did a random sample of 1,000 cities in the US to try and understand like, was this unique? And saw, and then extrapolated from that data and saw that, no, it wasn't unique. Something like 34 million single family homes, so regular households in the US don't have recycling.
Wow.
And it's, oh my gosh, where are these homes?
Mhm.
Well, they're on the outskirts of urban centers and in more rural areas. And they maybe had, and when I say they don't have recycling, what I mean is they didn't have pickup. They maybe had like drop off at like a town square or at a park or something. But we've seen is that those programs are way underutilized, way underutilized. And that if you can make recycling convenient, people will do it. Bought this business. They had about 200 customers. They were doing $2,000 a month. Nothing very big. But suddenly when the cardboard thing collapsed, I started looking at looking at the apartments. I can't do that. The payback period's too long. The sales cycle's too long. The cardboard thing, oh, that doesn't make sense anymore. And it also had a decent sized payback, 6 to 12 month payback. So it's like, that doesn't work. I don't have any money. I can't even like pay the loans I have, right? I'm gonna go bankrupt if something doesn't change here quick. But I looked at this house residential side and it was like, this doesn't cost, like the payback for this is very low. Maybe this can work. Started looking at one of the challenges we had was I was buying bins, for every house, put the recycling in. And the family that had previously been doing it, they were getting all of like the bottles and cans stuff in like a bag. They would line the bin with a bag, so it was easier for them to empty and load and do stuff. And I thought like, what if I cut out the bin and just had people put it in bags? In New York City, that's how all the recycling's done. It's just bagged and cardboard's flattened and put to the side. I have a sister who lives in Manhattan, and so I'd seen that, and I thought, if it works in New York City, it can work here. And I just started signing up new customers and telling them to put it in bags and put it outside. So I didn't have any expenses besides the cost to acquire them, like through Facebook ads.
Mhm.
And also my cost to do the pickup was actually cheaper because I didn't have to like grab a bin, empty it, go put the bin back. I could just grab a bag and go.
Mhm.
And so it actually reduced my expenses on the pickup side, and it worked. It was like, oh, this is working. So I started looking at this and it was like, okay, this one small town, Mapleton, Utah, wasn't large enough to support the hemorrhage of cash that was happening on the other side. And I was trying actively to sell that portion of the business to someone who could handle the highs and lows of the commodity market, and who had more route density, who could do it more effectively than we could. Which eventually I was able to sell it to someone, and I sold it for money, and it was losing money. So it was amazing. I was like, hallelujah. But in the meantime, I'm just losing money trying to get this thing,
Mhm.
trying to make this happen. And I started looking around and saw these other cities. Found another city that was about 3 hours away from where I was at, pretty rural, and saw, okay, it's 3 hours away. That's close enough that if crap hits the fan, I can go save the day. But it's far enough away that I really won't want to. So I'll get scrappy to make sure that I solve the problem without me having to drive 3 hours.
Mhm.
And decided we were going to try this Uber style. Basically, thought like, okay, I'm going to combine this, like how New York does recycling with like Uber, put those two together. I went and used Facebook once again to try and find drivers, and found a bunch of drivers in this one new city that I was testing with. Threw up some Facebook ads to acquire a bunch of customers, and launched. And never once did I have to go save the day. It just worked. And suddenly we had this model. It was like this, a way better model. Before, all the ways I tried it were pretty asset heavy. They had long paybacks. They were hard to scale because of that. Suddenly I had a model where it was super asset light, and I could launch this anywhere. And it was like, it just was great. And it was amazing because before, I felt like both business models I've kind of experimented with, I felt like they were both really great and they were wonderful. And I had it, and I was doing this great thing that I would have never gotten to this kind of gig economy model. Never would have gotten there without all the heartache that I went through on the other side, and the tears and all of that led to this. I love this idea that creativity loves constraint. Man, I was constrained and had to get really creative, and the outcome was way better than what I had. We're now operating in 30 states, doing, diverting close to 1 million pounds from landfills every single month in hundreds of cities. That never would have happened the way that we were going originally. If it weren't for the heartache, we never would have gotten there.
How did you push through to get to where you needed to be? Because that's where a lot of people would drop off, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely thought about it. There were a couple things that really helped me out. One is I believed in what we were doing. I really believed in what we were doing, and I believed in what we're doing, and that helped. Like, we were making an impact, and I didn't want to let my customers down. I didn't want to do that. The other side was, I saw the problem here was real. I maybe hadn't found perfect product market fit, but I found the problem. And I knew that the problem was real, and the problem, not that it mattered, and it mattered to people. The number of customers who had reached out to me and said things like, oh man, this means a lot to me. This, like, and I saw that people cared. It's like, I know that there's a business here, and I saw the opportunity. The opportunity was huge, and I used the kind of that as this motivating factor, to just have resilience. And that for me is the biggest thing, is resilience. And then there was one other factor that's important, which is, I felt a little bit stuck, frankly. I'm like, for me, it was either like go bankrupt, and like that's going to jeopardize your future, quite a bit, or figure it out. Figure out a way to make it work, because you either have a really crappy option, which is going bankrupt, or you have an option where you figure out to make it work and the outcome is amazing, and you just have to go through some really sucky stuff to get there. And it's like, well, I can either go through some really sucky stuff and go bankrupt, or I can go through some really sucky stuff and maybe not go bankrupt. Let's go for that option. And like, and I kind of pulled out all the stops, and like, in a way, it's like, I'm either going to go bankrupt or I'm not. And so I'm going to max out all my credit cards. I'm going to go get new credit cards and max them out to support the business. I wasn't going on shopping sprees. I was, I went in a huge amount of debt, because I figured I'm either going to make it work or it's going to fail. And if it's going to fail, I'm going to have done everything humanly possible to have avoided that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took some risks, and maybe there were, definitely some risks, and maybe acted, I don't know, you could argue acted irresponsibly, but it worked.
Yeah.
It worked, and we made it work, and didn't default on any debt. Didn't do it. Like, everyone ended up better off than they would have if I just threw in the towel.
Obviously, so much has changed compared to these days now. Tell me about your team. So tell me, how big is your team now?
Yeah, there's about 60 of us.
Wow. Oh, nice. What are the challenges that have come with this, and building your team, obviously, from the 5-6 man sales team at the beginning to what you've got now?
What it looks like today versus what it looked like a year ago versus what it looked like 5 years ago. Oh man, like, write down the job description. It's a completely different job. And that's hard. And it takes a lot of learning and a lot of coaching and a lot of mentorship. And I've been really lucky to have great mentors who have guided me, because, man, you kind of make it up as you go along. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job of it, but definitely not flawless. I mean, there was a time where we had some pretty aggressive growth goals, and we hired accordingly. We hired to meet those goals, but then we didn't meet the goals. And suddenly we had way too many people. And it was like, okay, what do we do? And I looked at our financial situation and where we were, and it was like, the right decision was to lay off about 20 people. And that was like the worst realization.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh man, we made a mistake. We thought we were going to get somewhere. We didn't. We hired accordingly. We took other people's lives and their livelihood, and um, it put it at risk. And we didn't, it didn't pan out. And I met with every single employee and had to lay people off, and it was absolutely atrocious. It was, oh my gosh, the worst. And worked hard to make sure that those people landed on their feet, and tried to help people find jobs after that, and let let people know that they weren't let go because of anything that they did. They were let go because the business
Interesting.
needed it and overshot it. And we had to draw the line somewhere, and there were people who didn't deserve to get laid off who got laid off, and that was it. So yeah, like learning, I feel like I've learned a lot from my mistakes, and I'm sure I will continue to make mistakes and continue to learn from them, hopefully less and less and less. But definitely kind of still feel those pains, and the pains are different.
Mm.
The pains are yeah, definitely different than they were, but then they exist nonetheless. And but we've been able to build an incredible team.
Tell me, let's talk a little bit more personally about you. I've seen that you are Forbes 30 under 30. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that and your journey to getting there.
Yeah. I don't have like a extensive bucket list of like, oh, here's things I want to check off. I thought that one was cool. I was like, oh man, I would love to do this. And you have to get nominated for it. And I'd looked at it before, and had a friend or two who were Forbes 30 under 30. And I thought, man, talk to them about the experience. And for a long time, when I was building this business, I'm now 32. So crossed over that 30 mark a couple years ago. But as I looked at this, I thought, like, my business, like, there's no point in getting nominated. I'm not there. But then it was when I was 29, it was like, I think I'm there. I think that, like, I think if I got nominated, I actually would stand a chance. So I actually was proactive about it. I went to one of my friends who was at Forbes 30 under 30 in the past, and said, hey, can you nominate me? And I went to one of our investors in Recyclops and said, hey, can you nominate me as well? And but for me, the biggest piece was not like who's nominating me. It was that, like, the fact that I'd grown the business to a point that I actually felt like, hey, I think that I could be selected.
Yeah.
And I was super, super pumped when it actually happened. It was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. Huge.
Completely. Did it open up more kind of, let's say, marketing opportunities for people to see this and think,
It just adds legitimacy. It says that, hey, someone took a close look at this individual and this business, and they think that it's meaningful and that it's going somewhere. And that legitimacy goes a long way. And even like when I'm pitching investors, I'm pitching people, like being that kind of Forbes 30 under 30, it just adds legitimacy. Did it add some like massive network of like, oh, suddenly all this, like, no, it wasn't like some like, there were some, opportunities there from like a networking standpoint and whatnot. Like I got some great connections there, but it wasn't
like Forbes, and they think, okay,
that's right. It was less about like, who it connected me to, and more about just like the legitimacy. It just adds legitimacy, which is a real struggle. For your early, as you're getting started with a business, it's a real struggle that customers don't trust you. They're like, is this real? Especially in the world where people get scammed so frequently. I can't tell you how many drivers and how many customers thought that we were a scam. And it's like, we weren't doing anything scammy. But you're asking for a credit card number. You're asking for a picture of someone's driver's license to be a driver. And they're like, so even just like outside of like the broader world, even just like for like the micro, having someone be able to Google Recyclops and see Forbes 30 under 30. Oh my gosh, it made our life so much easier.
Yeah, I can imagine. Last question for you here. Tell me what you see as the next challenges that you're going to be facing at Cyclops, and how are you going to tackle them to make sure they are successful?
Yeah. We're in a lot of places right now. But I feel like we've still just barely scratched the surface when it comes to growth. And so for us, that next stage is, going from tens of thousands of households to hundreds of thousands of households to millions of households. And like, what does that do for my business? And I don't know what challenges will come from that.
Yeah.
But I know that there will be challenges. And, I know that some things that, work at 10,000 households will break at 100. And I don't know exactly what those are. We're going to do our best to try and figure out what those are, but that's, it's the getting there and then the implications of getting there that are, I think, our next big challenge. But I look at um, kind of the world is our oyster. We have this huge opportunity, and now we just need to execute. We need to execute.
Hey guys, it's me again. If you enjoyed this episode of the show, be sure to press the thumbs up button below. And also, whilst you're there, hit subscribe. Otherwise, you could miss out on all of our interesting content we've got coming your way in the near future. Okay, guys, take care and see you soon.